everyone for joining us again for another session of NetApp on NetApp. This quarter, our theme is Active IQ Insights Behind the Infrastructure Powering Proactive IT. As always, please make sure to leave your questions in the Q&A. Any problems with audio, let us know in the chat, but we will be looking at Q&A for questions. And today, our speakers are Brett Albertson and Ted Carraher. So Brett is a Principal Technical Marketing Engineer at NetApp, responsible for technical strategy and communications across high traffic platforms, including Active IQ Digital Advisor. Ted serves as NetApp's CXO for security, overseeing the security architecture and risk posture of the enterprise infrastructure that underpins services like Active IQ. And Brett will be starting us today.
Thank you very much. Great introduction. Welcome, everyone. Let's get started. So today, I'm just going to give you a few slide introduction to what the infrastructure that Ted is going to talk about does. And then I'm going to let Ted take over and talk about the interesting part for you probably, which is the infrastructure itself. So let's get started. So the first topic is the auto support telemetry data. The infrastructure we're about to talk about is the one that processes, stores, and analyzes all that data. And when I say all that data, I mean all that data. There is about 23,000 customers and about 400,000 systems that send auto support daily. It is, as you may or may not know, auto support defaults to daily, weekly, and then there's special performance auto supports that come in once a week also. But we process about 400,000 systems, send that on a regular basis. You might say, well, what is contained in the telemetry data? I want to emphasize that it's not the data stored on the system. It's data about how the systems themselves are running. So if you think about it, it's capacity data and performance data, configuration data about, which PCI Express card is in what slot and which controller type it is and how much memory it has and how many disks and which type of shelves and how many, etc. It also has lots of logs. So there's event logs and there's some other more detailed logs. Event logs are like the main place we get for what happened and when it happened because it has time and date stamps. The detailed logs have a lot more information, so those are usually on a specific topic. So the event logs are kind of an overview, and the detailed logs have the details. So when a support person needs to look at things for a support case, they would go to those detailed logs probably to get what they need. And then, of course, we have performance information. ONTAP, E-Series, StorageGRID sends us performance data, and those performance data are usually in the format of counters that go over time. The way counters work is we have to do a difference of like what the counter is today versus what it was yesterday, and then we know how many of what happened when. Often the counters, like in ONTAP, are broken up by hours, so we have hourly performance counter information within ONTAP, for example. It does vary a little bit by platform, and obviously that's the thing we use to fill our dashboards, which I'm not talking about the dashboards yet. This section's just about the telemetry data. So you might say, well, Brett, you said a lot, but how much in storage? Well, we have many, many, many petabytes. So we use about 13 petabytes right now. We have about, 30 petabytes because there's some stretching over time of the data. And we have to temporarily store a lot of things. And it's about 600 terabytes per month. That's a lot of data. I don't know if you support a customer or if you're on here, if you're listening to this, if you are a customer, if you're a partner that supports a customer, that's a pretty large data environment. So the infrastructure we're about to talk about is a great example of a very large data warehouse. And we can talk a lot about how we store that data and the things that we do with that data. And speaking of that, so I already talked about the size of it. We have billions and billions, 800 billion data points processed monthly. But the thing I'm most proud of is actually the velocity of the data. So we do about 6 billion checks per month of risks for our customers. looking for problems, proactively addressing solutions. And it's this architecture is pretty amazing to me. This is just what data is sent by platform. It's mostly the same. There's a few small differences for some of the platforms. And there's some interesting stuff around Keystone. If you don't know what Keystone is, that is our, pay-as-you-go storage that is cloud-like in that you are billed monthly. It is an operational expense rather than an upfront capital expense, so that's why billing data is included. But otherwise, it's mostly configuration, capacity, performance data, and logs, as you can see. All right. So let's talk about what we do with this data. So our customers send us this data. The primary use case is to help them support their system. And we do that with a system we call Active IQ. And that's what Ted's going to talk about. When the telemetry data comes in, it gets parsed and various transformations happen and storage. And Ted's going to talk about that in about 5 minutes. But that data comes in, and then what we do is we populate a dashboard that customers and partners and internal NetApp people with the right roles inside NetApp have a web interface to that we call Active IQ Digital Advisor. We also have APIs to get into that data. It has the same access rules as the user interface. There's a great reason for that. Our own user interface uses our own APIs, so therefore it has the same access rules. Again, we use role-based access control to limit who can see what. So customer A can't see customer B, partner A can't see partner B stuff. Partner A can only see the stuff that they sold to their customer unless their customer revokes their consent for them to see it. And NetApp personnel only with certain roles can see the data. So a sales team can see the data for their clients, but they can't see data for other clients. And support personnel can see the data to support the customer, et cetera. So it's role-based access control within the Active IQ platform, and we take that extremely seriously. I think Ted is going to talk a little bit about security later when he gets to the architectural part. Besides having an API and a web interface, we also have a few integrations. We are available within the console, the NetApp console, if you know what that is. We also feed data to other tools. If you go to the NetApp support site, you'll see risks and things like that. That comes from Active IQ. We also feed the systems that actually do the proactive support thing. So if you have had a hardware failure, Active IQ detects that. Active IQ actually opens a case. It's not that support opens a case. Active IQ literally over APIs opens a case up for you on your behalf and fills in the information we have. And so Active IQ is the thing that does case automation, as we call it. So we do all those things, and the idea is you can use our APIs, our mobile app, or web platform to manage your system, to monitor your system, to fix things. And then the idea, it's a virtuous cycle. You fix things that updates the telemetry data, that updates our web interface and all the other interfaces, and then you can fix the next thing in your to-do list. And that's the idea, is that your system becomes more secure and you proactively address things before they become a problem. And speaking of that, that's why we call it Digital Advisor, because the idea is it is behind the scenes monitoring your health all the time, even when you're asleep, even when you're on vacation, even if you switch jobs, someone's there monitoring the system, and it's trying to give you proactive recommendations on how to achieve optimal health. And that's the idea, is you go from good to great from following the recommendations that we present in Active IQ Digital Advisor. That's the name. We hope it really is a digital advisor for you. But you might say, well, that sounds great, Brett, but how does it really help me? How does it really help my customer if you are a NetApp or partner? Oops, sorry about that. 98% of technical issues are predicted and proactively addressed using Active IQ. 98%. That's an amazing statistic, and it's completely true. We look at how things and when things are fixed, and if they are fixed before having to engage support. And 98% of the time, issues that are addressed in Active IQ Digital Advisor are addressed before or instead of engaging NetApp support. Also, if you compare customers that use the ActiveIQ ecosystem and send in auto support telemetry data, on average, when they do have a support issue, they resolve it twice as fast. And that's easy to measure because that's directly from case data. And then in surveys, 9 out of 10 people surveyed last year said that using ActiveIQ Digital Advisor saves them hours of admin time each week. And if you look at the case rates of P1 cases between people that use our ecosystem and those that don't, we've saved the NetApp customers that use it about 2 million hours of avoided downtime. And that's every year. All right. I like to call that our brag slide, but that's my last slide. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ted to present his slides.
Sure. Thank you, Brett. Okay. So as Brett mentioned, this is all based on what we call ASUPs, which are auto support messages. And you see here on, here's my pen. One second here, let me get the pen to work. On the left-hand side here, we have customer X with storage system X1. And the ASUPs are being collected on the system continuously, pretty much, just storing different information about the configuration and current performance of the system. And we're going to have to send those over the internet, of course. Our preferable way of sending those in is over HTTPS. We also have other supported methods like SMTP, SMTP secure emails. And you could also, in some rarer cases, use NetApp authenticated file upload to send the payload that way. But the preferable method and the majority method is over HTTPS, over regular ASUP messages being sent on schedule. There's also different triggering available, so you can send it on. It will be normally sent on a scheduled time. There are weekly and daily ASUPs, and then there's also the ability to do AODS, which is ASUP on demand. So if there is a support case that occurs and we want more information, we can trigger ASUPs that way remotely. The first thing that happens, though, is as the ASUP comes in over the internet, of course, it's encrypted with TLS, right? Transport layer security. So that is secure. It comes in, and the first thing that we do is it hits what we call AES. That is our ASUP encryption service. And what that does is it immediately looks for personally identifiable and customer identifiable information. And it's going to immediately do any kind of encrypting and masking of that data based on a bunch of rules throughout your files. Now, we call it, we say it's PII, CII. And in a lot of cases, it is things that are potentially personally identifiable information, potentially customer identifiable information. So again, as Brett mentioned, this is only configuration and performance information about your system. It is not your data in there. So in cases where there are like volume names and aggregate names, we are erring on the side of caution. We're like, okay, well, it's possible that they stored something, that they named their volume something that is important to them that would identify their company. So erring on the side of caution, we go ahead and encrypt all that stuff. There's also like an email support contact person at the company so that we have to talk to. So that potentially PII. So we encrypt that stuff. And those keys are stored in escrow. They are only available to the right people that are allowed to get those keys to do that decryption. So that's the first thing, and we write that to the storage system here. And then we start moving along our processing data flow pipeline here. So in this, we are doing things, as Brett mentioned, we're parsing the data. As we parse the data, we're storing it into a database here with different information about it. We are looking at our CRM system, and we immediately notice that system X1 belongs to customer X. So that mapping is maintained there, and that is used later on so that only the right people are able to get to these ASUPs. And then we step along a number of transform steps here, right? We're constantly reading, parsing, storing things in the database or back to the system, and we're decorating the data along the way. So we're looking at install base information, product information as we go along, do these transforms and write information about it. And that's where we're adding all of our value, which is doing the different health assessments and recommendations as we step along the way here. Next slide, Brett. Okay, so as I said, we have those associations. So customer X or employee A at customer X, and we have other employees, of course. We have partners that might have multiple customers they're working with, and then we have NetApp employees themselves that can see more things, but based again, as Brett mentioned, on their job role. So this is all very much controlled by our role-based access control system. So that maintains the mapping of, okay, employee A works for customer X, and they can see only the systems X1 through XN here. And same thing, customer or employee B, a customer Y, and so on. That's all that mapping is in our CRM system. So our RBAC system, our role-based access control, is very cognizant of that as any kind of information is being requested to these user interfaces and APIs along the way. So and that is all, any of that, like I said, is made sure that only the right people can see the information that they need. Okay. Nothing else there. So going into our infrastructure, what supports this system here. So we are a very much microservices infrastructure. Most of our platform runs on Kubernetes and is containerized. In a lot of cases, it's a function as a service. We have the data flow pipeline that you just saw before is a Kafka messaging pipeline that is taking the different steps of the process and alerting the different microservices that they have work to do. That allows us to scale things out, to make different priority queues, so that if there are things that need to move ahead of other things in the processing pipeline, that can be done and adjusted by scaling different areas of the architecture. All of this is running on NetApp storage, except for the stuff that's in cloud supported stuff. But for the most part, all on NetApp storage. So Brett mentioned those storage efficiency savings that we have. That is a big thing that we take a huge benefit of. We also have some parts of our application that require S3-like storage. So that's where we use the StorageGRID. The parse data is coming into MongoDB. And then when we serve stuff out, we are storing it and making it available mainly through Graph APIs and REST APIs. And also we have some internal stuff that is in a data lakehouse. We use Dremio. It's a data democratization service. So that's basically what our stack is. Next slide, Brett. So kind of decorating that on top of the diagram that we had before. That's where, so we can see where we kind of stepped on my line here with where NetApp was in this picture and where Mongo was. And as you see, stitched in between these services as we're stepping along here is Kafka. So Kafka is the thing that's telling, okay, this one has job to do, that job's done, now the next one's moving along, and that moves us along our data pipeline as it eventually makes its way out to the data endpoints, which are the GraphQL and the Dremio. Next slide, Brett. Okay, so and then again, similarly, so our services that are running there that are available to the customer are also served inside of Kubernetes. For our internal, we're using Dremio. That Dremio is running on top of NetApp storage also. It's using the StorageGRID technology, which is an S3-like storage. The various APIs, like I mentioned, are GraphQL, and those GraphQL APIs are also made available to our partner teams that have different integrations that utilize those. So that's pretty much the gist of our tech stack there. So we use a number of features of NetApp storage, and those have been very helpful to us as we've developed this architecture. One of the big ones that has come up recently is SnapMirroring. So for different compliance reasons, we of course need to have and show that we have proper disaster recovery. And we utilize SnapMirrors to give us geographic diversity as far as backing up the data. So we have data in one geographic location within the US, and then we just SnapMirror that to another geographic location, and then we can spin up, compute, and mount those SnapMirrors when we need to do disaster recovery or to rehearse our disaster recovery. That's been a very big help to us, and certainly something that is a huge benefit of the NetApp storage that we're sitting on top of. Brett already mentioned of the storage efficiency, but that's been another big boon to our platform because we store so very much data that it could not be done if we didn't have proper storage efficiency here. So a huge help with that. Another one, we use FlexVolumes. So we have large migrations that we have to do sometimes. And by using FlexVolumes, we are able to SnapMirror data from one side to the other geographic locations, and then just create FlexVolumes that point backwards to that data, and thereby allow ourselves to have very low downtime migration capabilities. Very helpful in that regard. I already mentioned StorageGRID. So StorageGRID, again, is used for various applications that need an S3-like storage backing. So that's the Dremio and a few other parts of our platform that require that. And then the NetApp storage itself is encrypted storage. It is backed by the keys are stored in a hardware security module. And this is what helps us meet our compliance requirements for various suites of requirements that we get in audits from customers. So another help to our system. Yeah. Next, Brett. Okay, so as far as artificial intelligence, we have a number of things that we've been doing there. Of course, we do the more traditional types of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So for forecasting capacity, as Brett mentioned, we are looking at the various performance and counter data and able to project when you are about to start to run out of storage. So that is a very useful thing for our health reporting. Another one is our at-risk system reports, ARS. This is a more traditional, also expert system that looks for different signatures in the telemetry data for when there are possibly different risks to the system as far as the system health. So this is used for alerting and our dashboard systems there. So another one there. We also, for our own support internally, use a semantic search system so that when we get the various telemetry and we get that there's a new case, we can do a semantic search through other cases that we've seen to see where they are similar and help us to properly more quickly triage and find resolutions to those types of cases that are popping up. And as we move along here, we're actually actively developing and utilizing our own new product, which was a former one of these NetApp on NetApp sessions, AIDE, the Artificial Intelligence Data Engine. So that will be an upcoming capability, which will again help us close down the mean time to resolution, mean time to triage for support cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Next slide. Yeah, go ahead,
yeah.
Brett.
And I put some examples. If you haven't seen the capacity forecasting we have in ActiveIQ, I was just putting an example in so I could show visually what it looks like. This is you can do this at a node level or a cluster level. It's in ActiveIQ Digital Advisor under the capacity widget. And then I also was putting an example of our wellness widget, which is where we do some of the predictive expert system analysis to identify, find, and proactive report on potential issues, not current issues, potential issues that may rear its head in your environment. So you access that within ActiveIQ. There's a wellness widget, and there's also a health check widget, which is more for best practices. Wellness is more for more critical issues. That's why the color coding, you see red and orange, and there's some few other colors that aren't in this screenshot. Okay, so that is all the slides Ted and I have. There was a question that came in that I wanted to answer live. Harvey asked, can we tell if a current customer is using ActiveIQ, or do we have to ask them? So I have two answers for you. One is you can tell if they are sending in telemetry data if they are your customer, because if they're your customer, you will have access to ActiveIQ on their behalf. If you are either a NetApp, I'm assuming from your question, you're either a NetApp sales or SE or a partner sales or SE. So you'll be able to tell if they're sending in telemetry data, although you will not directly be able to tell if they are accessing the website to get the goodness out of the website or not. I'm trying to think of a way that you could tell whether they're using it or not, but I can't think of one off the top of my head without asking them directly. There's one place where they can mark risks as acknowledged, and if they have marked any risks as acknowledged, then at least you'll know they're using it, but they don't have to do that, so you're not certain about that. If you have a business need and there's a good reason for it. Contact me offline. My contact information, or contact information, not for me, but will be provided at the end of this. If you have some need for that, let us know, and I will be happy to oblige you that if we have that information, which I'm sure we do.
Yeah, if there's any further questions that you don't think of during this webinar, or there's something you want to have more confidential conversation about, we'll put the email address in the chat, but it's netappit@netapp.com. So please share any questions there. Oh, I see it's up on the screen now.
Yep.
Another question we had, Brett, was how are you guys training the AI models? Are you using customer telemetry data or?
Yeah, so I can answer that. The one thing to remember is when we get telemetry data from the system, that's not the system, the data stored on the system. So we don't have access to any data stored on your system. So we obviously cannot train AI models with that data. So there's no chance of that leaking or being a problem. But to answer your question, NetApp does not train its own AI models. We do not have the GPU capacity to do a true training of any AI models. So we do not train any AI models. When we use AI, like Ted started to mention there, we use models we get from elsewhere with just, we may use our own data for searches of that, but that would only be used for things like, the only use case today is a support use case for the support team to use that. But no data from the system is transmitted to us, and also no data is used to train AI at all, because we don't train our own models here at NetApp. Sam asked in the Q&A, is there a recently published YouTube video covering these topics that can be shared with NetApp customers? Actually, this will be posted to YouTube. So you will get a link. Actually, I'll let you answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is being recorded and it will be shared with you guys. Give us a few days just for processing and updating, but we will send a follow-up email once it's ready to be publicly shared.
And then if you have a customer that wants to learn about either auto support or digital advisor, Active IQ Digital Advisor in general, there's actually an official NetApp Learning Services class that I helped make a couple of years ago that's on that topic. So you can send them that. And if they prefer not to take a whole, actual class with a little animated guide that asks you questions and teaches you, if they don't want to do that, there's actually, I have a YouTube series. If you search in YouTube for me, Brett Albertson, or for Active IQ Digital Advisor, I think you have to add NetApp because there's a fitness company using the term Active IQ that posts to YouTube also. But I have a playlist that's basically all the main features of Active IQ Digital Advisor, but it does not cover the infrastructure part. So if you want what Ted covered, you're going to have to use this recording that's about to be published. We haven't done an infrastructure one in a number of years, and the last time we did it, I checked it. We were still using Hadoop, I believe, so that was at least 5 years ago. So that one's out of date. So yeah, this recording will be great.
Thanks, Brett. And then one last question: how do you ensure that only the right people have access to this data?
Yeah, so that's great. Ted mentioned a little bit. We try to comply with all laws everywhere and all security best practices. And the way we do it is a least access model, meaning we use your role within your company, within NetApp, or if you're a partner, to ensure that. And then, as Ted mentioned, we keep every login at NetApp is associated one-to-one with a company. You can't have a login for a company login that is, associated with more than one, or one that isn't associated with a company, and they only have access to their own data. And then for partners on NetApp, it's based on your role. So we have very strict lists of a company can give a partner access. There's a thing called a partner of record. And if a company gives that permission, then that partner can access the data. If they don't, they can't. And then the same with NetApp. You need to have it's on a need to know basis. So if your role needs access, for example, if you work in our support department and you have a support case with that customer, you can see the data.
Yeah, and for places where somebody is outside of a role, they can request access, but that goes through an entire approval chain through their management chain to say, okay, why does this person need access? And then they are given access for a limited amount of time, and then that is taken back, and they have to re-request that access again.
Yes. And then there's a great question in the Q&A. Do we have a YouTube or case study on our move away from Hadoop? That was actually, I believe, this is going back in time, but that move away from Hadoop was presented at Insight, I think 4 years ago, if I remember right. But I think I can dredge that up and send it to you. I do think we actually do have a short, I think it's still recorded. I assume we wouldn't have thrown it away from 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, if you want the short answer about why we moved away from Hadoop, I'm just going to be 100% honest and say cost. We have a corporate policy of using for production use cases, we have to have officially supported products. And our Hadoop environment was in the petabytes. And our support contract for that was, I won't say the number because I don't think I should say it in a recorded thing, but a lot of money in capital letters. And so we actually were trying to find a more modern and more efficient solution. The other problem with Hadoop was we had to scale storage with compute. If you know Hadoop, you know that they have storage nodes that have the compute built in. At least they did 6 years ago. Maybe that's not current anymore. My knowledge is only from when we used it. But at the time, you had to scale both. And because we have a massive amount of data, we needed less compute than storage, and you can't scale them independently. So it wasn't a good solution for us, Hadoop, because we ended up with way more compute than we needed to get the storage we needed, if that makes sense. For if you know Hadoop, you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, we ended up being way over provisioned in compute and way for the amount of storage we needed for the amount of petabytes of Hadoop we needed. So that was the two main reasons we moved away from Hadoop and onto our current architecture, in short. Great question.
Yeah, thank you for answering. Any videos that Brett has referenced and Ted, we'll try digging up those URLs and share them with you when we're sharing out the recording via email.
Yep.
So don't worry about trying to remember all the different names.
Yep.
And if there's no more questions, I think we can leave it there. I'm not seeing any more in the chat. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Brett and Ted, for speaking. And we hope we see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.